Hi all and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Today we chat about a record Inglis Chairman Sale and the two mares which set new marks for Inglis. We reflect on a very successful Weanling Sale and ask what that may tell us about the broader bloodstock market. In racing, we talk Warwick Farm's new status as the jewel in AKC's crown, as well as new licensing requirements for NSW trainers. Joining us for an extended chat is Tom Ryan, jumps jockey extraordinaire and a key part of the bloodstock team at Lindsay Park Racing. While in wagering, we watch through the challenges faced by Sportsbet and others tell us about the direction of racing in Australia. Tim, it was great to chat as always. We knew this Chairman's Sale catalogue was stacked with quality, but the competition was quite amazing last night. $14 million lots, an average in excess of $700,000. I mean, Inglis could be nothing but pleased about the whole situation, could they?
Oh, this is a build-up over years since I think the first Chairman Sale was 2017, and they've had a few ups and downs, but the last few years has just built and built in popularity. They've worked hard, acquiring the right mares, and those elite mares. It is Magic Millions, and Inglis go very hard at it to convince the owners to sell their respective mares at their sales. And last night, the big buyers turned up, particularly Yulong and Coolmore, of course, who stand at the top end of the market, and then Bella Nipotina with Michael Christian buying her back.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Bella Nipotina for a minute. I mean, she was obviously a very rare offering. We've never seen an Everest winner offered through public auction before. We spoke to Michael Christian in January. I remember Tim, we were walking around Magic Millions and had a chat with Chris Owen. We talked about whether they were going to sell her or not. And at that stage, it was still up in the air whether she was going to keep racing or whatever else. But you can kind of tell with Chris O, like he tries to keep a poker face, but there was a sense of determination in his eye that, this mare, he really wanted to keep this mare. He's worked really hard for the family. The dam Bella Nipotina was obviously where her name was, an orphan foal that they raised and, had brought together through themselves. They bred this champion horse that's been able to, compile this extraordinary record. So, it wasn't really that surprising to see that it was Chris O, even despite the fact he was hiding behind a pole at one stage, putting his hand up to buy this horse.
Well, you can't, people do get attached to the horses. It's not just about the money, even at that incredible level of, at 4.2 million, that Chris O, and, he said afterwards that his wife Siobhan couldn't be there because she'd be too emotional. That's how attached they are to this mare. Most people might just take the money and, someone else buy for 4 million and they get the lot. But they were so desperate to take her home. He's been working on this for months, obviously, how he, talking probably, there's only a few players that could have bought her at that level. And if they're out of the market, well, he was a chance, and he's taken her home, and he was delighted and emotional. He's pretty hard and sort of old footballer, Chris O, but even he was tearing up there on the coverage.
Yeah, and the Straits' Charlie Mamoni caught up with Michael Christian after the sale.
You'd made it pretty known that you wanted to keep Bella. So were there any points during the night that you thought you weren't going to be able to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's she's obviously a very, prized possession, and there was always going to be some really strong support from some of the big farms and big mare buyers. And we're just so thrilled that we were able to outlast and secure her.
Yeah, fantastic. Did you have a limit in mind of what you were going to go for, or what you were going to let her go for? Or were you going to let her go?
Oh, look, yeah, no, it had got ridiculous. But we had in mind 4.5 million.
Okay, yep. So have you got any idea about who you're going to go to for stallion?
Look, we didn't want to get the cart before the horse and start making those sort of decisions because we hadn't secured it. But now, over the next week, we'll sit down and work out physical. I'm big on physical matches, and we'll also do a fair bit on pedigree analysis as well, and then make a decision. And we can go from there. We've come the full circle. We raised her as a foal, and took her to sale and retained a 50% interest in her, and enjoyed one of the most incredible rides anyone could ever imagine in the industry over 5 years.
Yeah.
And culminating in her being the first mare to win the Everest, and then to be able to then sort of draw a line in the sand and say, right, that little phase is done, but now we're embarking on this whole new exciting venture with her as a brood mare, and to be able to bring her back home where it all began, and send her to a stallion and raise her foals and to see what they might be able to do. And it's what we got involved in the industry to do. We're breeders, and to be able to, you aim to be able to breed a stakes winner, and you aim to be able to breed a Group 1 winner. And then to think what she's done, winning 4 Group 1s, culminating in the Everest win, and be the second all-time prize money earner behind Winx, is more than anyone could even dream of. And now we've got the opportunity to bring her back home and start on this new phase.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You could hear a pin drop in the auditorium when she was going through the ring. That's for sure. It was very theatrical.
Yeah. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, but
Were you nervous?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's all worked out well, and my wife Siobhan spoke. She didn't come up from Melbourne, mainly because she was scared that we would lose her, and she wouldn't. She didn't think she can cope. But when I spoke to her late this afternoon, she basically said, "Look, this is what we've been involved in the industry for. This is what we've dreamed of, to be able to breed a mare of her quality." And then it would just be such an empty feeling if we were then just to say, well, goodbye, and that's it. So we're committed to the industry, and we're committed to getting her and bringing her home, and enjoying the next decade with her foals.
Well, enjoy it, Michael.
Thanks, Chloe.
You could really feel the passion and emotion from Michael Christian there, couldn't you, Tim? And it was a fascinating one. I mean, he hasn't revealed a stallion that he's going to go to. Any thoughts from your perspective that what would fit for him and what would fit for Chriso?
Well, Chriso's bought some expensive mares with his partner, his brother Brad, and other investors in the past, and I'm Invincible's been a good one for him, and always backed him, and maybe Zoostar perhaps, but it has to be the top echelon of stallions, doesn't it, to justify that price. So it's not just the 2.1 that he's put up, and yes, she's won 20 million, so they're in front, but it's a long-term investment from here, with going to the best stallions here, or even does he consider sending her overseas to a Frankel or something like that first up? It'd be interesting debate in the next few weeks.
Yeah, if you're doing it based upon previous use, you'd probably say I'm Invincible was favourite, but there's plenty of other options there, and because of her pedigree being by a son of Steak Cry out of a Star Witness mare, there's probably plenty of options there for him. So plenty of things to work out. Plenty of options too for Amelia's Jewel, Tim, who's headed to Coolmore. $3.8 million. Star mare, highly regarded. By Uni, which gives it that bit of exotic pedigree aspect as well, out of a mare who's already produced a couple of other stakes winners as well. So, just so well credentialed, this horse. Peter Walsh, probably a little bit surprising that he let it go, but you spoke to him a little while back, didn't you, Tim? His ideas and thoughts were that he's, by the time he's probably at a stage of his life now where, continue to breed on long term with his family is probably not in his interest.
He said by the time it all pans out to be 75, he's a bit pessimistic, Peter, but he still looks pretty healthy to me. But he's he decided to sell her. He's still got the mother to continue on with. And he's got a share in Bazusto, the colt, who's running this weekend in the Gold Coast Guineas as well. Half brother to Amelia's Jewel. An interesting thing about not Coolmore buying her for a lot of 3.8 million, but the fact they're going to send her to the States to send her Justify to Southern Hemisphere time. So they sent, I think it was 10 mares to Justify last year in the States, and they're already back at Coolmore here in the Hunter Valley, and they're doing it again. So they're still believing in that stallion. It's interesting that with Wootton Bassett and other stones they've got here and Switzerland off the track and Shinzo, that they're still supporting Justified.
Yeah, because the international pedigree aspect fits into that. I mean, speaking of Wootton Bassett, he's invincible. Cornwall purchased as well, and she'll be going to him. Tom Magg cheekily announced that Wootton Bassett's going to stand for a record Australian fee of $385,000, including GST this year. That's above Extreme Choice, who's currently the equal record holder with Reduced Choice on $330,000. I mean, I guess we're not that surprised given how well Wootton Bassett particularly has gone in the Northern Hemisphere. He's got 8 winners, although no stakes winners yet in Australia, but 8 winners from his first crop in Australia. They really rate this stallion Cornwall, and they're really trying to make the best out of him, aren't they?
And there was, the Justify didn't come back, as we saw, just because of his value in the North mostly. There would have been debate about Wootton Bassett. Do we risk bringing him down? He's standing for a lot of money in the North, doing a great job. So to justify that commercially, and they're a massive commercial operation, Cornwall, that they had to stand him at a big fee. So you're going to have a good mare to go to him. The shareholders, obviously, Cornwall can justify that. And there'll be a handful of outside mares that'll go to him, and the best of the best, I guess, he'll get the opportunity to cover.
His first Cornwall crop in the Northern Hemisphere, so obviously Cornwall purchased him halfway through his career. Has put out 4 Group 1 winners in his first crop. So his success in the UK, Northern Hemisphere, is just phenomenal at the moment. So the Chairman Sale wasn't the only sale, Tim. We've spoken extensively about that, but obviously the Weanling Sale this week was also a fabulous success for Inglis. Record aggregates. It was quite remarkable what they were able to do and achieve out of this sale. A record price, $775,000. Like, it all worked out pretty well for Inglis through the week, didn't it?
Yeah, it's their biggest biggest catalogue for the Australian Weanling Sale they've put together. So the biggest aggregate's not a surprise, but it was, as we've kept saying, all throughout the sales season, the top end is very strong. But interestingly, I spoke to a few breeders and sellers this week of weanlings that from 20 to 40, 50,000, and they were delighted with the prices they got. So it's where you see your foal fitting in, and that's what the weanling market is. It's those cashing in for cash flow purposes at the top end, and others that not discarding stock, but again, cash flow, costs a lot of money to raise a horse from here through to the sales, and just sort of manage numbers, and they were delighted. So I guess it shows that there is a strong buying bench from New Zealand and Australia, and the red wall syndicates from overseas as well, David Redvers and Sheikh Fahad and so forth, that but it's still very strong, very vibrant.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes about the confidence in the broader bloodstock industry, doesn't it, Tim, where things are at the moment? There really is it's kind of interesting. There's some uncertainty around the economic environment in Australia and whatever else, but the bloodstock industry, particularly the tail end of the season, and I'll be pretty blunt, Inglis has had a terrific sort of 5 weeks, haven't they, between Easter and this sale, these 2 sales this week, Australian broodmare sales on today. It's been a bumper time for them.
We talk to Sebastian Hutch, the CEO of Inglis, a lot, don't we, Bren? And he's always forthcoming and expansive in the way he speaks, and he's made a point of saying how hard the Inglis team has worked from top to bottom, right through the bloodstock team and marketing and all the other departments they've got there. But he makes a point of almost every time you speak to him of pointing out how well the team's gelled, working together with the common goal, and it's paying off at the moment, getting buyers there and the support of the vendors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at Magic's. I'm sure that momentum will continue to a vast degree, I'd say.
Time now to reflect on Darley's very strong stallion roster for 2025. Traffic Warden offers a lot of value for breeders this season. A Group 2 winner at 2, only just missed in the Group 1 size, then came back stronger at 3 to win the Run to the Rose and push broadsiding right to the wire in the Golden Rose. Add to that proven Street Cry sire line and his impressive physique, you've got a stallion that offers real quality at an accessible fee. He joins the Darley roster for his first season at Kelvinside. Then we change focus now to the ATC's vote over Rose Hill, something we've talked about a lot over the journey here on Stroke Talk. There was a note that went out to members this week, or hardly a note, it was a 111-page document, but ahead of the vote on May 27th. obviously it's an extensive document. I've read bits of it. You've obviously had a look through it as well, Tim. What did you take out of it? What did you take out as, I guess, significant from what we initially saw when the first vote was abandoned, a month or so ago?
Well, it's the new plans for Warwick Farm and the member benefits or inducements, I guess, to try and convince the members to vote yes for this massive $5 billion project. Will it, just the no voters that I've spoken to, I just don't think anything's going to change their mind, no matter what. So this $50 million plus, thrown their way with $1,000 annual food and drink vouchers and so forth, I don't think it's going to do it. But it's interesting the levels they're going to now to try and convince the members to vote yes. And again, I've asked this question nearly every week. Where was this 6, 8, 12 months ago?
Yeah, and that's the question, isn't it? I mean, it is interesting. The plan seems to be evolving. Critics of the plan have said that this is a bit of a bribe. The ATC is saying that it's important that that they maintain, if they're going to build these facilities, that they maintain connections with their members, and the best way to do that is, I said $50 million or $57 million over a $5 billion project is a little bit of a drop in the ocean. But it's a fascinating situation. The Warwick Farm, $800 million transformation of that track, which sits, arguably in a worse part of Western Sydney than what Rosehill does in terms of location and probably, what's the best way to put it? Just in terms of development they need to do. They'll need to raise the track up. They need to, there's flood mitigation that's going to put in place. Part of that long document includes that. It is a significant amount of money on this track, which, as I mentioned in an article this week, hasn't been spared a lick of paint in the last 10 years and hasn't really had a major refresh in probably 30 years. It doesn't get used that often for racing, I suppose, so it enables it to sort of stay on top of that. But it is a fascinating and ambitious plan. Interesting little stat that came out that one of the ATC quoted a New South Wales government survey which showed that betting on racing had declined from 12.9% of the population to 9.9% of the population in the space of 5 years. Now, there's conflicting other data around that, so you can work on that. But also in that same document was the fact that when it comes to people from backgrounds with languages other than English, or people who don't speak English at home, it's 1.6% or something of that ilk that are participating in racing betting compared to 11.5% for those who speak English at home. And why that's significant when you look at Warwick Farm in particular is that 54% of people in the Liverpool local government area don't speak English at home. So you would say, at the very least, that's not a core audience for racing. And if the ATC are going to convince those people that building an $800 million facility on their doorstep is worthwhile, then they're going to have to pretty much show their work, how they're going to convince those people that it's worthwhile being there. If they were able to do that, it would be an enormous value for racing, because racing's challenge is a demographic challenge. It really is this challenge that racing has become a bit old world in Australia and an evolving, I guess, Australian landscape where people are coming from many different backgrounds and different cultures. Racing's ability to capture those people has over the years been, to be perfectly honest, short of the mark. But for me, it's a really interesting one, Tim. I'm not sure that's quite enough to get the boat across the line. We'll see what happens on May 27th. It'll be a fascinating sort of set of circumstances to see how it plays out. But just get the feeling that that maybe, despite the fact that this plan is much more comprehensive than the first plan, it might be a bit too late. You've been chatting to a few trainers around Warwick Farm, Tim. I mean, what have they made of the disruption?
Well, so if this goes ahead and during the raising and rebuilding of Warwick Farm, those trainers, and there's, depending who you talk to, 800 to ATC says 800 horses, but anecdotally it could be 900 horses that are trained at Warwick Farm will need to be moved. Now, my understanding is on Tuesday, the ATC said, well, most of those trainers will go to the provincial tracks, and they were up in arms. And then on a Wednesday face-to-face meeting with all the trainers, or the majority of Warwick Farm trainers at the Warwick Farm committee room, they backed down and said, no, Randwick and Canterbury will be able to house most of those horses. I'm waiting to hear back at the time of this recording from ATC about that. I'm told it was quite a Steve McMahon was there. A lot of ATC figureheads, and they were told, squarely between the eyes, I guess, that this is not happening. This can't. They're not necessarily opposed to the Warwick Farm upgrade, but the damage by being shifted to a Kembla Grange or a Gosford or Wyong or Hawkesbury, just to their businesses could put some trainers out of business. The impacts on staff, staff won't. The majority of staff won't move, and then they might be lost to the industry. Full stop. So there's a lot of things at play. The interesting, was a very heated meeting, as I was told, but there were some humorous moments. I'm told Gary Portelli told the Moston Copper development person that was there, Matt Moston, that just bring out the plans from 10 years ago with the new stables and everything that was promised. So I'm not sure how it went down, but the trainers got a bit of a laugh out of it. They're actually united for the first time ever on one issue. And I said there is some pro selling Rose Hill people there, or trainers, but in terms of the disruption on their own businesses, their family lives, their staff, that would have on that. There needs to be some compensation and different things, how they're going to manage this to minimise as much as possible if it does go ahead.
And the traders' business model sort of under focus in New South Wales at the moment, because Racing New South Wales, as you reported during the week, Tim, are bringing in a sort of additional requirement that trainers must provide a notice of assessment from the tax office, effectively a tax return. The trainers must be able to provide that to show that they're, that they're viable and that they're financially viable. Now, on the surface, that would seem a reasonable understanding to make sure that trainers are operating. We've seen some issues elsewhere at the moment with other trainers struggling to sort of meet that criteria. But there's been a fair few trainers that feel this is an imposition on personal liberty, and the practical aspects of this are probably still not absolutely clear, are they, Tim?
No, it's interesting how much reach that story got through social media and just on our site statistics, Bren. There's a lot of feeling there. Some are, I spoke to some accountants and lawyers to try and get some background on this. Is this commonplace? And some said it is in other industries, so it's not. Some were saying it should have happened years ago, where I see other people commenting that, well, businesses and trainers haven't even had to put in their 2024 tax returns yet, and so it'll be 18 months old anyway. So is it current? Does it have any relevance? And handing over that personal information to Racing New South Wales.
Yeah, and I guess
it'd be very interesting by the reading of the letter. If they don't do it, you won't be relicensed for next season. So the trainers are sort of backed into a corner there. You sort of have to do it. I've spoken to other trainers who've already just got on with it and sent it through. But it'll be. I don't think this issue is going to go away anytime soon. For sure, there'll be some backlash.
Yeah, and the practical upshot of that is that businesses don't technically have to put in a tax return until May of the following year. So if you're putting your tax return and submitting it to Racing New South Wales, effectively the data's 12 months old at least. So anyway, interesting to see how that plays out as well. Tim, we were lucky early in the week to catch up with Tom Ryan, our favourite Tom Ryan in racing. There's a few Tom Ryans, but he's been a huge fan of the straight over the journey, and Tom is someone who we really were keen to chat to for a couple of reasons. Well, obviously he's got a terrific jumps racing career, and last week rode 3 winners at Warrnambool, including the winner of the Galleywood. But he's also significantly involved at Lindsay Park as well. So as I said, early in the week we caught up with Tom to have a chat through his career and his involvement with Lindsay Park. And we've got a special guest with us here today on Straight Talk, and it's Tom Ryan. Tom, of course, highly successful jumps jockey, works with Lindsay Park. He's involved in different aspects of the game. And one of the reasons we wanted to get Tom on, Tim, was because, he's one of those rare people that works across different aspects of the industry. He doesn't, like, you see him at the sales, you see him at Warrnambool riding 3 winners as you did last week. You see him at various different places. So it's great to get Tom on board. And Tom, you had an amazing week last week. You rode 3 winners, I think, including the Cunning Fox and the Galleywood last week. I mean, have you been surprised about where your career's taking you?
You have, I suppose, yeah. Look, last week was obviously very, very good. It was great. But just very lucky to get on those sort of horses. But But as you said, I suppose I work obviously mainly for Lindsay Park, and always been a big follower of bloodstock, and yeah, I'm quite I've always wanted to be in bloodstock and always wanted to be a jockey, and I'm playing both codes at the moment. So yeah, it's obviously a dream coming true.
You can take us back through your background, back growing up in Galway in Ireland, and that's a big, obviously, jumps festival. And how did you end up in the horse game?
Well, yeah, so obviously grew up in the west of Ireland, but my brother was a jockey before me, and he was mainly based in France, and then he came back home from France and he started training in Ireland, and I kind of went through my apprenticeship through him, and then I was champion conditioner in Ireland, and mainly rode in Ireland, but obviously rode across the pond as well in England, at the bigger festivals like Cheltenham and Aintree, and Ayr up the north, and a few more places like that. But yeah, mainly was in Ireland, but it was mainly got into it through my brother, really.
In your brother David, and then obviously your nephew Ross Orion as well, won the Arc and Breeders' Cup Sprint last year. He's doing very well for himself.
Yeah, well, actually, Ross is David's son, so yeah, David has had a few jockeys go through his hands down through the years. Obviously, it started with me, and it's continued on with obviously Ross. My other nephew John Fahey rides in England as well. Another good lad there in Kildare called Lee Roach rides a lot for Dermot Wells and a few more others. So he's had a fair few jockeys for a very small stable. He's had a fair few jockeys through his hands. But yeah, Ross is obviously flying the flag on the international stage. And we've seen him obviously over here. He came over here and did a little stint with the Lindsay Park here, and he was only here for about 6 weeks, 2 months or something like that, and he rode about 13 or 14 winners. But yeah, since he's gone home, he's obviously flourished again, and obviously winning the Arc last year was a massive thing. I mean, that's unbelievable stuff, We kind of said that we put the polish on him here in Australia for him to go back and ride like that, like the way he is. But he was always very talented, and but it was especially very very rewarding for my brother David, because obviously he spent his time riding in France, and for his son to go back and win an Arc, it was pretty special.
You ended up in Australia, Tom.
Oh, every year there used to be a jump jockeys team that came over to Australia every year. And I was fortunate enough to get picked one year to ride for Ireland in Australia, and we rode in Victoria and South Australia, and I loved it here at the time. And I said if I ever got a chance, I'd go back to Australia. And then with the global financial crisis when it hit there, obviously in 08, 09, we were really struggling in Ireland, and 2010 obviously, and then I just said myself and my brother, we thought we'd spend a year in Australia and get out of hell as it was at the time. So we landed here in January 2011, and came for a year, and we haven't gone home.
Talk us through, I mean, how hard was it to sort of start a career again? Because people knew you over here. Obviously, you've been across here before, but it's not easy to try to convince people. You also came into primarily came across as a jumps rider in a sport which it's effectively operates sort of 4 or 5 months a year. I mean, how hard was it to sort of I guess start again and make the connections you needed? I believe you ran into Steve Pateman relatively early in the journey to sort of help you along, and you become friends with Kieran Maher and different people. But how hard was it to sort of start again from that point of view, Tom?
But it was difficult. Like you're starting from scratch again. No one knows you. It's hard to get your name out there again. It takes time to get your name out there again. But as you said, I met Steve. I actually met Steve at the tennis in Melbourne, and we had a few drinks, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I was going, I was going to do a bit of track work, and I was going to. There was no real plan. He goes, no. He says you have to get your jumps license again. He says, not that I ever got rid of it, but he says you have to ride over jumps over here. He says this would be wasted. He said it'd be stupid not to. And thankfully we did. And yeah, obviously he's best mates with Kieran, and so then we obviously met Kieran, and then we were all palling around together, and it was a pretty good time. To be fair, there was a lot of drink drank as well at the same time. but that's basically it. We started again basically. As my brother said, get your wheelbarrow and your shovel and start again, and that's exactly what we did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's a relatively tight knit community, the jumps community in Australia, isn't it? I mean, these guys have, everyone works together. They take care of each other. There's obviously risks involved with the sport as well, and the way things work out. But you were able to sort of plot your way through them. You become quite a successful jockey, finding the ride you need as well as combining it with your other work. So it has worked out pretty well in that regard, hasn't it, Tom?
It has worked out very well. But as you said, like we're a very tight knit group. The jumping community, obviously, because we probably have more down days than up days. As you do in the racing industry, full stop. But I think there's more. I think more work goes into jumpers, and obviously the jumping family know all that, and every win is special, and they share it with you as well. So I think that's why we're more so knitted together in the jumping community. But yeah. That's how I get started in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So talks about, I mean, we've seen you sort of work in sort of plenty of places. Yeah. Tim and I have come across you at the sales, and we always have a chat because there's plenty to talk about. Talk about sort of how the relationship with Lindsay Park came about and sort of enabled you to branch out and become, I guess, more than just a work rider and a jumps jockey, but actually become someone who's working in the business day to day, Tom.
Well, so I was working for Peter Moody, obviously, and then Pete got rubbed out that time, and I was looking for a job, and I'd ridden a few winners for Lindsay Park, for David Hayes at the time, just over hurdles, and I thought, that there always might be some sort of a jumper coming through there, and that it'd be a nice place to work, and I got on very well with JD and Ben at the time. I didn't know Will at the time, but I got on very well with JD and Ben, and so I asked for a job off Ben, and got a job with Lindsay Park, and just slowly but surely we went through it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the bloodstock side of your role with Lindsay Park, how has that developed, and do you really enjoy that side of the business?
I love that side of things. Obviously, I've just been shadowing Dean Hawthorne. Because Dean he's the number one judge right across the board here in Australia and New Zealand, and to be learning of a man like him, it's you can't buy that sort of grounding, as the fellow says, but it's great. How we bounce things with the bloodstock team here in Lindsay Park, I think it's super, because obviously we go to the sales and we'll look at every horse, but then we'll make a case for every horse before we buy them and put a value on them, and it's been working out very well for us. I think the first year we bought a blue diamond winner in Little Bros, and we also bought a cracking horse called Arkansas Kid, who paid for himself more than double on his first start, and little things like that. But it was all because of the grounding that obviously Dino picks them all out, and then we make a case of why we should be buying them all, and see who we can get into them. But it's a great learning curve that way, and it's a good way to do it.
Well, you can't make a slow horse fast, so doing the groundwork, getting the right horses into the stable for any trainer is pivotal, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And I mean, Dean Hawthorne is mainly our eyes, basically. He's seen more champions than we've even seen on television. He's seen them in the flesh, from foals to yearlings all the way up, and he's a very, very good judge. And it's a pleasure to be able to follow him around at the sales and learn off him.
Is there anything that sort of he particularly looks at, or that you like, in a horse that or even something you don't like, and go, well, that's off the list because of X, Y, Z?
There's a couple of little things. Yeah, there's a couple of little things. Especially like everyone has their own little things, and Dino is right across what they like here in Lindsay Park, and there's little things about different horses that we don't take, and we're not fond of, and but we can make a case for every horse, which is the beauty about it. And there's no way of exactly knowing what you're getting until you get it home and you put a saddle on it. But you can narrow it down, obviously, but no one exactly knows.
And you've got your own farm up at Rowe now as well, Tom?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Myself and my wife Jemima. We've a little farm there, just outside Rowe, and we have a few spellers and obviously a few younger stock coming through that we might flick through a sale or whatever. Yeah, only a little farm, but every farm I can tell you there's always something to do and there's always work to be done, and there's never an idle day. We thought it'd be nice and easy going, having a few horses and maybe a few sheep, but I can tell you. Every spare minute you get, it's gone into the farm.
And how do you plan to keep riding over the jumps and hopefully for the jumps fraternity, there's years to come for the sport. Do you intend to keep riding over the jumps for the foreseeable future?
I do, yeah. I suppose because I'm not getting any younger now, but I'm 40 years of age. And for a jump jockey, that's the twilight of his years. There's plenty of lads that go on from they're 45 and that. But I suppose we're lucky here that the jump season is only 6 months. We've been cramming a lot into that 6 months, but obviously you can let, even though we have high weights after that, but you can let the body recover after it, and it probably enhances your longevity, if you like. But yeah, I see myself right for a few more years, hopefully, please God, touch wood, and hopefully there's a bit more success.
Tell you what, there's very few people who can combine the, as Tim and I know, the largesse of working in the bloodstock world, i.e. going out for dinner every night and going to sales and being in that world and all that sort of stuff, with the discipline of being a jump jockey, Tom. You mean, and you must have the natural physique to be able to, weather both worlds, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite good lucky that way. Look, for the yearling season, sale season, it's not too bad because it's our off season. So I can let the hair down and have a few drinks and and eat pretty much what I like. But I'm not overly big, obviously, but I can. I only have to sweat to do bottom weight, which is very lucky. So yeah, we're not too bad that way.
Terrific. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us, mate. I know you're a fan of the podcast, but we're a big fan of what you do. I think anyone who applies themselves in different aspects of this game, and you're obviously extremely enthusiastic and driven to succeed. And it's great to have you on Straight Talk and talk you through what's a really really interesting career that you're building for yourself.
I tell you, I'm a massive fan of the podcast because it's a podcast that lays all the truth out there, and you can pick your own, you can make your own judgment after that. So I'm a massive fan of your podcast, and thanks a million for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Terrific, Tom. Thanks very much.
Let's thanks.
Stop.
The catalogue for Inglis Digital's May early sale will be available on Friday afternoon. Included among the catalogue is a share of one of Australia's top stallions, Extreme Choice, 2 breeding rights in Bivouac, and a half sister to Golden Slipper Farnan in Folder Tornado. Check out inglisdigital.com for all the latest. Finally, Tim, this week in wagering, it's actually been a decent week in wagering news. Plenty going on there. Significantly, the most significant story was Sportsbet, or Flutter, who's Sportsbet's global parent company, reporting their quarterly results. Among those results were that the Australian business, i.e. Sportsbet, is down around about, I think it was about $58 million American, so $90 million Australian, year on year compared to this time last year. That was attributable to issues within the racing structure and the way that racing's working for them, as well as some negative sports results. And this is the narrative we're hearing a bit. Entain put out a statement, their quarterly results last week, saying the Australian business is down about 8% year on year in terms of revenue. We're starting to see these big companies, and I put this in my newsletter yesterday. Australia's biggest bookie, Sportsbet, has a problem, and its problem is racing and how to make it profitable and how to make it work for them. We've spoken about point of consumption taxes. We've talked about raising fees. We're talking about increasing bookmaker percentages. It was alluded to in an article from Daniel O'Sullivan this week that we published on The Straight around about the challenge of this, Tim. Where does this lead? Does racing face a crunch point when it comes to continue to re-engage people on betting on the sport?
Absolutely. I think the PRAs and by extension the state governments have to work with the corporate bookmakers to make it, everyone needs their cut. So again, it comes down to taxes. Whether there's the appetite there from the government and the PRAs, I'm not sure, but maybe it does reach a point where certainly the point of consumption tax forecasts haven't been met from state treasuries around the country. So maybe it reaches a point where we go, actually, or they go, we're losing too much. This is not benefiting anyone, and maybe they change the model, but I can't see it happening immediately. But if sports bet are losing that much turnover and revenue that every other bookmaker has to be, and particularly the smaller ones that don't have the scale, they can't afford to be leaking too much turnover. The business model collapses.
Yeah, 90% of racing's revenue, remember 90% is through wagering turnover. Daniel O'Sullivan talked about the importance of that and re-engaging with punters and making sure that punters aren't feeling like they're being ripped off through racing. That it's not that the challenge of racing becomes, it's the challenge of backing a winner in racing becomes a positive rather than a negative. It's a really good article. Daniel's someone who I've sort of had a little bit to do with over the years. And when he put that up on X the other day, I reached out to him and said, do you mind if we put this up on the straight? Because I think it's really good for our audience, really important for our audience to sort of understand that perspective. And I think what is also interesting, Tim, is I reached out to a couple of people in the wagering industry yesterday. And there was a few people that a couple of responses that echoed through, which were racing needs to look at its model. It needs to look at its cost base. And it needs to look at its duplication of services. That this can't continue to be, the industry can't continue to support inefficiencies within the way that's administered, which coming from the wagering industry is fascinating. They see the opportunities there for racing to be much more, what's the word I'm looking for, efficient in how they produce their product. We saw a story earlier this week, which was an interesting one as well, where Tab saying they're now going to introduce betting on through your app in play on sport in agency or in venue. So what that does is enable you. Previously, you had to go to either a EBT or the operator or pick up the phone and make physical phone call to bet this, but they've got approval in New South Wales to do this. This is significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, that obviously that could generate additional turnover, which from a point of consumption point of view could come back to racing. But racing's other challenge is if you've got people sitting there watching sport in TABs, Tim, and not watching racing, and they can bet in play, then the turnover type racing, i.e. we're talking about greyhounds in particular, but also harness racing and low-end horse racing, becomes less and less appealing as a product. And I think that's a broader challenge longer term. If live in-play betting were to come into Australia on sport, I think that the sort of the whole model around about as racing sustaining this lower-end turnover stock model will become a lot more challenging. Okay, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by Inglis and Darley, our fabulous sponsors. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcasts, be it on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, watch us on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and send an email to editor@thestraight.com.au to let us know what you think of us. Well, maybe not that polite way, but certainly let us know the things you'd like us to chat through. We'll talk to you again next week.